The whole thing started because I tried to fix the dryer. It wasn't even broken, really. It just made this weird clanking sound when it ran, like someone dropped a handful of quarters into the drum and hit delicate. But Jessica said she could hear it from the bedroom and it was driving her up the wall, which is dramatic, considering we lived in a ranch style with all of 2 doors and maybe 35 feet between appliances and sleeping quarters. Still, I figured I'd get husband points for effort, so I unplugged it, slid it away from the wall, and crawled in there with a flashlight and the kind of determination usually reserved for gold miners and kids in cereal aisles. What I found wasn't a quarter. It was a sock. A red one. A very not our sock kind of red one. Now, before you get ahead of me and think this is one of those stories where I pick up a sock and suddenly my whole marriage collapses like a flan in a cupboard, hold your horses. It's not just the sock. It's what came next. See, this sock had initials stitched in the inside of the cuff, like some charming little embroidery job your aunt might do if she was nosy and fond of labeling things that didn't need labeling. BW. We don't know any BW. The only B I knew was my Uncle Barry in Florida, who hasn't left his recliner since the Bush administration, and I doubted he was stealthily mailing Jessica undergarments as part of some covert operation. So I sat there in the laundry room, which was really just a closet with an identity crisis, holding this red sock and thinking, well, maybe I don't want husband points today. Now, for the record, I didn't confront Jessica right away. That's not how I operate. I'm what you'd call conflict avoidant, which is a fancy term for someone who would rather digest a pine cone than start an argument. Plus, Jessica wasn't home at the time. She was out helping Rachel with wedding stuff, which, I'd later find out, was a euphemism with the structural integrity of a wet paper bag. Instead, I did what any mature adult man would do. I placed the sock on the kitchen counter like a piece of modern art, poured myself a cup of coffee that tasted like disappointment, and sat on the couch watching reruns of Wheel of Fortune until I could pretend none of it happened. But denial has an expiration date. Mine showed up on Tuesday. I was in the garage, knee-deep in a project that had no purpose other than to get me out of the house, organizing bolts by size, because why not? When I heard Jessica come in through the front door, heels clicking across the laminate like punctuation marks. "Hey, Kenny," she called, too brightly. She only used Kenny when she wanted something, usually related to me lifting something heavy or pretending her mother didn't criticize my hairline. "Did you fix the dryer?" "Nope," I said, popping my head out. "But I found a sock." She blinked at me. "A sock?" "Yup. Bright red. Not one of ours. Had initials on it." Her face didn't even twitch. Not even a flinch. If I hadn't known better, I'd have thought I hallucinated the sock entirely, maybe conjured it up out of marital boredom and too much caffeine. But then she said, "Oh, that's probably Rachel's. She did some laundry here last week, remember?" Reader, she did not. I mean, if Rachel had come over, I'd have remembered, because Rachel never just comes over. She arrives like a weather system, big, loud, and leaving cosmetic samples in every room. So now I'm looking at my wife, the woman I've shared 8 years and 3 IKEA dressers with, and she's giving me a lie so flimsy I can see the daylight through it. Still, I nodded. Right. Must be it. I went back to organizing bolts. Because again, pinecone confrontation. Except then things started getting weird. Not loud, dramatic weird. Casual weird. Quiet weird. Like finding out your neighbor alphabetizes their shoes or your barista knows your blood type. One morning, I noticed the Bluetooth in her car renamed to Ben's phone. Another time, I caught a whiff of a cologne I didn't recognize on her coat. Not that standard musk and mystery scent, but the kind that says, "This belongs to a man who buys matching socks on purpose." And yet, Jessica stayed Jessica. Smiling. Talking about nothing. Watching those true crime shows like she wasn't possibly starring in one. There was a point where I wondered if I just imagined all of it. Sock, scent, Bluetooth. Maybe I'd finally cracked, gone full tinfoil hat because I didn't like how quiet things had gotten between us. But the universe, bless its twisted sense of humor, wasn't done with me. The breakthrough came from Harold. Now, Harold isn't a detective. He's not a tech wizard. Harold is my neighbor, 72, retired, and convinced the CIA is using his bird feeder to monitor him. He also owns a drone. And as fate would have it, he loves flying that drone straight across our backyards like it's his patriotic duty. One Sunday, I was helping Harold figure out how to sync his footage to his computer when he clicked open the wrong folder. And there it was. A perfectly framed 4K clip of Jessica, my Jessica, pulling into our driveway while I was supposedly at work. Except she wasn't alone in the car. And that's when Ben stepped into my life. Tall, tan, with sunglasses that screamed, "I do yoga," but in a smug way. They laughed. She touched his arm. He leaned in too close for someone who wasn't rearranging her teeth. I stared at the screen like it might change. Like maybe if I blinked enough, Ben would transform into Rachel, and we'd laugh about the sock again. But no, it was her. And him. "Oh, that's the guy that's been over a few times," Harold said casually, sipping his Diet Right. "Thought you were on some kind of modern marriage thing." "Yep," I replied, voice too calm. "We're on the cutting edge." So I thanked Harold, made up some excuse about grocery shopping, and drove home, except not to buy groceries and not to have a breakdown. No, I had a new project now. And if Jessica wanted to play games, then she was about to meet Kenneth Walden, master of passive-aggressive justice. But I'll save that for next time, because this was just the start. The calm before the sarcastic storm. Jessica once told me she'd rather listen to a dentist explain tax policy than attend another neighborhood cookout. And yet, there she was, standing in Becky Sloan's driveway on a Saturday afternoon like she'd been born with a lemonade in one hand and a folding chair in the other. That alone should have been enough to make me suspicious. Jessica's idea of small talk was nodding vaguely while scanning for the nearest exit. So when she started volunteering to help with the community yard sale, the ice cream social, and whatever that event was where grown adults painted birdhouses for fun, I started to take notes. Literally. Page 1 of my notebook. Jessica pretending to like Becky equals national emergency. It wasn't that Jessica couldn't fake things, she was excellent at pretending to enjoy my uncle's yearly slideshow of his Arizona cacti collection, but this was a new level of commitment. She was suddenly the smiling, waving, ultra-present version of herself that usually only emerged at weddings and the occasional client dinner. Meanwhile, back at home, things were silent. Not cold. Not angry. Just that sort of quiet where you keep bumping into each other in the hallway and both say, "Oh," like it's a surprise the other one lives there. I'd mention a movie coming out. She'd nod and say, "Yeah, maybe," and then vanish into another room like she had an urgent appointment with her throw pillows. I gave it about 2 weeks before I stopped pretending I didn't care. Not in a dramatic, "we need to talk" kind of way. More in the "I installed a doorbell camera and didn't tell her" kind of way. See, after the drone footage incident, thanks again, Harold, I had options. I could have confronted her, made a scene, stood in the kitchen gesturing at a sock like it was Exhibit A in a courtroom. But that felt beneath me. I'd spent 8 years learning Jessica's tells. I knew how she layered her lies, thin, even, like peanut butter on toast. And I knew she counted on me to let them slide, because I always had. But this time I had a plan. I called in a favor from my cousin Trent, who owed me from the Great Thanksgiving Stuffing debate of 2019. Trent was an electrician who moonlighted as a smart home consultant, which is a fancy way of saying he liked gadgets and didn't charge family for installing them. 2 days later, we had discrete cameras in the garage, the living room, and my personal favorite, the laundry nook, also known as the scene of the Red Sox crime. Jessica never noticed. Not once. She went on about her day like she was starring in her own sitcom, unaware someone else had the remote. For a while, nothing happened. Just normal footage. Her watching videos on her tablet, scrolling through online shopping sites, occasionally answering calls with her voice dropped to that low, half-laughing tone that made my skin itch. But nothing concrete. No guest appearances from Mr. BW. No dramatic scenes. Just Jessica being unusually chipper and oddly private. Until the Tuesday she left her tablet on the coffee table. Now, I'm not a snooper. Not by nature. But if someone leaves a puzzle out with half the pieces filled in, you're going to take a look. It's human. And curiosity is less about trust and more about confirming what you already know but wish you didn't. So I tapped the screen. It lit up. No passcode. Bless her consistent overconfidence. There wasn't much there, no messages, no emails. But the browser history told a different story. Mostly boring. Recipes she'd never cook, furniture she'd never buy. But one stood out. A link to a public shared folder. No password. Just a name. Ben. At this point, the universe wasn't even trying to be subtle. I clicked the folder. It opened to a collection of videos. Not inappropriate. Nothing that would have gotten flagged anywhere. But personal. Him recording himself talking, sending updates about his job, his gym, his dog, so much for no animals, and how he couldn't wait for the weekend. The kind of videos you send someone you care about, someone you miss. The kind of videos you definitely don't send to a married woman whose husband is organizing bolts for emotional stability. There wasn't anything scandalous in the folder. No smoking gun. But it was enough. More than enough. Because I know Jessica. I know her smile when she's faking it. I know her laugh when it's real. And the version of her in those videos, responding with heart emojis and saved gifs, wasn't the version I'd been living with. That Jessica had moved on, and she'd taken her personality with her. So what did I do with this revelation? Did I pack a bag and storm out? Did I change the locks and cue up some dramatic playlist? No. I printed one of the video stills and framed it. Then I waited. It took her 3 days to notice. I'd placed the frame in the hallway, just subtle enough to pass by, just bold enough to make her double take. When she finally saw it, she paused, stared, picked it up. "This isn't ours," she said slowly. I looked up from the couch. "Oh, I must have found it online. Thought it looked familiar." She didn't say anything. She just set it down and walked off like someone trying to figure out which step of the staircase just moved. Later that night, she brought it up again. Casually. Like she wasn't sweating internally. "Where'd you say you found that picture?" "Reddit, maybe." I shrugged. "Or one of those shared folders. Internet's full of surprises." She didn't ask again. But she did start locking her tablet. Which was fine. Because I already had the camera footage. And what happened the next day made it all worth it. Jessica invited Rachel over. This, in itself, was monumental. Jessica hadn't voluntarily let Rachel into our house in over a year, mainly because Rachel was the kind of person who treated casual conversation like a hostage negotiation. But there they were, in our living room, drinking seltzer and whispering like two teenagers in a bathroom line. Rachel, being Rachel, didn't whisper very well. "I can't believe you let him in the house again," she said, not even bothering to lower her voice when Jessica shushed her. "He's not here during the day," Jessica replied. "It's fine. Kenneth's clueless." I paused the footage there. Not because I was shocked, but because I needed a moment to appreciate the artistry. Clueless. Like a sitcom husband who can't toast bread without setting off the smoke detector. I replayed that line 3 times. Then I saved it. Then I made plans. And by plans, I mean something quiet. Calculated. The kind of plan that doesn't involve shouting or crying or turning my life into a soap opera. Because Jessica wanted someone who didn't notice. So I decided to become someone she couldn't ignore. The morning started with Jessica deciding she suddenly cared about throw pillows. That was my first warning. We'd had the same 5 misshapen ones on the couch for years, mostly as decorative landmines that served no purpose other than reminding guests they weren't supposed to sit too comfortably. But now, apparently, the living room needed a pop of color. She said this while scrolling through an online store with the intensity of someone comparing surgical instruments, not fluff-filled fabric squares. I didn't ask questions. At that point, I was letting her run her own show, because I had tickets to the final act. She ordered 7 different pillow covers. 7. For a couch that fits 4 people on a generous day. When they arrived, she opened the box with a level of focus I hadn't seen since our taxes were due, and she realized I'd filed under single by accident. She lined them up, stared, repositioned them, stared again. I leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. "Pillows looking guilty?" I asked. She didn't laugh. Just gave me a tight smile like someone who was halfway through a math test and realized she studied the wrong chapter. That afternoon, I pulled up the footage from her and Rachel's little whisper fest, clipped the audio, and transferred it to an old thumb drive I'd labeled garage sale photos so it wouldn't raise suspicion if she saw it. I didn't plan on playing it for her yet. The thumb drive was more of a souvenir. A trophy. The real game was just starting. My plan wasn't flashy. No speeches, no door slamming, no drama. Jessica was expecting one of 2 things, ignorance or a meltdown. I had no intention of giving her either. Instead, I started doing things she wouldn't expect. I cleaned the garage. Not the normal kind of cleaning, like sweeping the corners and calling it a day. I mean serious, psychotic organization. Shelves. Labels. A pegboard. I installed a second set of cabinets I found at a moving sale and arranged my tools like I was auditioning for a catalog. Jessica noticed. On the second day, she stood in the doorway with her arms folded. "Getting ready to build something?" she asked. "Yep," I said, lining up socket wrenches. "Maybe a future." She didn't know how to respond to that, which was exactly what I wanted. Then I started doing laundry. Religiously. Every towel, every dishcloth, every sock, mine or not. Folded, stacked, color-coded. I ironed t-shirts. I wiped down the inside of the washing machine like it was sacred. And I always made sure Jessica saw me doing it. If she found that suspicious, she didn't say anything. But her posture changed. She started watching me more than usual. Not in the affectionate way she used to, back when she still made coffee for both of us without being asked. This was more like a coworker trying to figure out if you're gunning for their promotion. One night, I went to bed before her. That never happens. I'm the kind of person who needs to double-check the locks, the thermostat, and whether or not the blender is still plugged in. But I brushed my teeth, walked past her on the couch, and said, "Don't stay up too late. Wouldn't want you to miss anything." The next day, she woke up early. Made pancakes. That was new. "You okay?" I asked, sitting down. "Why wouldn't I be? Just curious. You usually reserve pancakes for birthday mornings or apologies." She narrowed her eyes, flipped one, and said, "You're acting weird." Define weird. "You're cleaning things. Going to bed early. Folding socks. Isn't that what husbands are supposed to do?" She didn't answer. Later that evening, I opened the living room closet. This was the closet where we stored all the unnecessary things we'd been too emotionally attached to throw away: old picture frames, board games missing half the pieces, a ceramic vase someone gave us as a wedding gift that looked like it came from a haunted thrift store. I pulled everything out, lined it up, put the whole shelf's worth of clutter on the floor, and just stared at it until Jessica walked in. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Just deciding what stays and what goes." She gave me a look, like I was rearranging the Titanic's deck chairs and asking for her input. I held up a photo frame, the two of us on a trip to Colorado, smiling like two people who thought inside jokes and takeout were enough to last forever. "Keep?" I asked. Her face twitched. "If you want." I placed it in the donation pile. After dinner, she asked me to help her move a storage bin from the attic. I followed her up the steps, held the ladder steady, watched her climb. When she reached the top, she stopped. "What are you really doing?" she asked. I tilted my head. "Ladder safety. You know what I mean." "Jessica," I said, "if you're feeling guilty about the throw pillows, just return a few. It's not that deep." She climbed down. Slowly. That night, I swapped out the framed photo in the hallway. I replaced it with a printout of a calendar. One specific date circled. A date when, according to her online receipts, she'd been at yoga. Which was interesting, considering the same timestamp showed a phone ping from a location 30 minutes away, near a co-working space I'd never heard of, and a Bluetooth pairing with a device named Ben's phone. She saw it the next morning. Paused. Looked at me. "What's this?" "Calendar art. Minimalist vibe." She didn't bring it up again. By Friday, she started asking me how my week had been. With actual interest. She brought up old memories. She mentioned a vacation idea. She asked if I'd like to try a new restaurant. That's when I knew she'd picked a direction: damage control. But I didn't play along. On Sunday, I organized my closet, pulled down a duffel bag, started folding clothes with no particular destination in mind. Jessica hovered in the doorway. "Going somewhere?" "Not yet," I said. She didn't speak, just leaned against the frame. I glanced up. "You don't seem surprised." "I'm not," she said. "I've been waiting for this." "Funny. You never seemed all that interested in my schedule before." Silence again. The kind that stretches, not because there's nothing to say, but because everything that matters has already happened and nobody wants to be the one to spell it out. That night, she sat beside me on the couch. No TV, no music, just her, quiet, thinking, probably wondering if I'd let her explain something, or ask questions, or cry. I didn't give her that chance, because I wasn't looking for a confession. I already had the footage. I already had the date. I already had the frame. And tomorrow, I had the next step. On Monday, I stopped by the storage unit I'd been renting for the last 4 years, the one Jessica had never been interested in visiting because it smelled like rust and old resolutions. Which wasn't entirely inaccurate. It was mostly filled with things I didn't want to argue about donating. A box of old vinyls, college notebooks, the recliner she said made the room feel dorm-like, and a full set of camping gear we never used because she said sleeping outside was for tax evaders and people with something to prove. I didn't go there for any of that. I went for the whiteboard. Back in 2019, I bought this massive dry erase board from a company that went out of business. It was intended for brainstorming business ideas with Trent, before we discovered he wasn't so much an idea guy as he was a snack guy who liked drawing rocket ships while pretending to listen. I hadn't touched the board in years. Until now. I loaded it into the truck and brought it home. Didn't say a word. Just parked it in the garage, rolled it to the far wall, and grabbed a pack of markers. By the time Jessica came home, I'd outlined everything: dates, times, device names, call logs, location tags. Each item had its own line. No commentary. No conclusion. Just the data. Clean. Neutral. I even drew a little timeline across the bottom, just to give it that polished, quarterly report feel. If someone wandered in and didn't know better, they might have thought I was planning a startup, not cataloging an extracurricular relationship. When she opened the garage door to put something in the freezer, she stopped. Her keys clicked against the floor. She stared at the board like it was written in a foreign language she suddenly regretted not learning. I didn't look up from the shelf I was pretending to organize. "You like it?" She didn't answer. "Visual learner," I added. Figured I'd make it easier. She walked out without saying a word. Next came the new habit: mail sorting. Until that week, she handled all the bills, the cards, the subscriptions. I didn't care. But I started taking over. Every envelope, every catalog, every flyer for discount blinds. I sorted it on the kitchen counter, just where she could see me highlight things and make neat little stacks. I started collecting duplicates of anything addressed to current resident. When she asked why, I said, "Figuring out where I live." She laughed. "Weekly. What's that supposed to mean?" "Depends who's asking," I said, circling something on a water bill. That Friday, I set up a folding table in the front yard with a cardboard sign that said "Free stuff, emotionally complicated." I didn't put much out, just a box of books we both hated, 2 ceramic mugs from our office's holiday party, and the throw pillow with the sequins that change color when you swipe them. Jessica pulled into the driveway mid-scroll on her phone, took one look at the table, and slammed the car door shut. "What is all that?" "Items of questionable value. Much like some recent decisions." "Is this supposed to be funny?" "Only to me." I went inside. By Sunday, she was cleaning. That was her version of a white flag. She vacuumed the baseboards, rearranged the hall closet, asked if I wanted her to make that pasta you like. I told her I was trying a new thing, unseasoned clarity. The next day, she left a sticky note on the bathroom mirror that said, "We should talk." I peeled it off, stuck it to the garage whiteboard, and labeled it Phase 2, Damage Control. Trent came over that evening. He didn't ask questions. Just looked at the board, whistled low, and said, "You want me to set this up as a slideshow?" I thought about it, then shook my head. Too soon. I'm still in the educational phase. We watched a game in the living room while Jessica stayed in the bedroom. I could hear drawers opening, things being moved. Maybe she was checking if her phone was bugged, or if I'd left more exhibits in her purse. I hadn't. Yet. The next morning, I left early. Dropped off a small envelope at her office's front desk. No note inside. Just a printed screenshot of her calendar, same circle date as the hallway print, but this time, highlighted in 3 different shades and labeled Field Trip. I don't know if she got it. I don't know what she said when she did. All I know is, that night, the framed calendar was gone from the hallway. She replaced it with an abstract print of leaves. I replaced the leaves with a copy of our marriage certificate, redacted like a government file. She didn't touch the frame after that. Thursday evening, we sat in the same room for almost an hour. She watched TV. I watched her. Finally, she turned to me. "What exactly do you want?" I tilted my head. "You mean in life? Or just in this very specific sitcom we're living in?" She looked tired. Not in the dramatic, "I haven't slept" way. Just worn. Like someone who packed for a different trip and ended up somewhere else entirely. "I want to fix this," she said. "Which part?" She hesitated. "All of it." I nodded. "Interesting." Silence again. "You're punishing me," she said. "No. I'm informing you. You could have yelled. You could have walked out." "I still can," I said. She looked down. "You haven't." "Maybe I'm curious." "About what?" "If you're capable of an original sentence." She blinked. "I've heard the others," I said. "The phrases people use when they're caught in something and trying to talk their way out of it. I just want to know if you can say something that hasn't already been said in every movie where someone realizes they've wrecked a perfectly normal life." She didn't answer. "I'll wait," I said. I didn't need revenge the way people talk about it. I didn't need to destroy anything or make grand declarations. I just needed her to feel it, not the guilt, but the slow unraveling. The quiet reveal that I wasn't the fool she'd quietly agreed I must be. That I'd seen every step and let her walk it anyway. The thumb drive stayed in my desk drawer. Unplayed. Untouched. It didn't need to be seen. It only needed to exist. I started sleeping in the guest room that week. She asked if I wanted to talk. I said, "I've said a lot." She said, "You haven't said anything." I said, "Exactly." The thermostat became the new battleground. Quiet, ongoing, and strangely symbolic. Jessica kept adjusting it 2 degrees higher. I'd lower it back when she left the room. This went on for 4 days before she finally asked if the system was broken. I said no. She didn't bring it up again. It was a Tuesday night when it finally happened, the moment where the conversation neither of us wanted had to happen. Not because of some big, dramatic push, but because the house got too quiet for it not to. She walked into the guest room where I'd been sleeping for the last couple of weeks. She didn't knock, but she hovered like she was thinking about it. "Do you want to keep this up?" she asked. I sat on the edge of the bed, flipping through a manual for a drill I wasn't planning to use. "Define this. This thing where you act like I don't exist unless it's to prove a point." I closed the manual. "Jessica, we're in a situation where if I breathe too loudly, you assume it's a performance. I'm just trying to keep it neutral." She leaned against the doorframe. "I messed up." I nodded. "Yes, you did." Silence. "I was lonely," she added, like that might balance the math. "Jessica, I've been in the same house as you for years. If I was any more available, I'd be attached to your keychain. I didn't plan any of this. That makes 2 of us." She sat down on the small armchair by the window, the one no one had ever used because it was more decorative than comfortable. "You made your point. With the timeline, the photos, the quotes, the framed sarcasm. I thought the color-coded markers were a nice touch." She rubbed her temples. "Do you want me to explain it?" "Not really." She exhaled like she expected that. "I'm not trying to defend it. Things got so quiet between us, and I guess I got scared that this was all we had left. So you went with option B. The one with the Bluetooth name and the motivational gym selfies. It wasn't about him. No, it was about you. And that's the part that makes it worse." She paused. "You know, most people in your position would yell, or pack a bag, or throw something. I know. But you've been calm. Just calmly tough." "I've been honest," I said. "That's new for us, remember?" She looked away. "I didn't yell," I continued, "because I wasn't surprised. I didn't pack a bag because I wanted to see if you'd care. And I didn't throw anything because honestly, nothing here feels worth breaking. I didn't expect you to do it this way. I didn't expect you to lie about yoga either." More silence. She sat with it for a bit. I didn't fill the air. I let it stretch. "What now?" she finally asked. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you're done pretending you're sorry or ready to admit you're just scared of the consequences." She blinked. "You don't believe I regret it?" "I think you regret getting caught. And I think you're terrified of what happens if I stop playing along with the version of us you still think exists." She swallowed. "That's not fair." "You're right. It's accurate, though." Jessica folded her hands in her lap, knuckles pale. "I've been thinking about everything. What we built. The house. The routines. Even the stupid throw pillows. Ah, the great decorative arc." She smiled for a second. Then it faded. "I don't want to lose all of it." "That sounds like you miss the convenience." "I miss you." "No," I said, "you miss the version of me that let everything slide. The guy who filled the dishwasher and laughed at your jokes and made your problems feel like mine. You don't miss me. You miss not feeling guilty." "That's not true." "Then say something true. Something I don't already know." Jessica stared at the carpet. I was angry. Not at you, at myself. For how bored I let myself get. For how easy it became to ignore what mattered. I didn't go looking for anything. I just stopped saying no when it showed up. I nodded slowly. "You think that's honest?" "Yes." "Then let me try something honest, too." I stood up, walked over to the desk drawer, and pulled out the thumb drive. I held it out to her. "I've had this for a while." She took it, hesitated. "You watched it?" "I didn't have to. Its existence was enough." She turned it over in her hands like it was heavier than it looked. "Why give it to me now?" "Because I don't need it anymore. I've already moved on. I'm just still physically here." She looked up. "So this is it?" "No. This is the start of the real part. The part where we stop playing characters in a show neither of us wants to be in anymore." "You want a divorce?" "I want peace." She swallowed. "That's a yes." "That's a yes." Jessica nodded. No tears, no outbursts. Just quiet agreement, the kind you reach when both people know they've already left the conversation emotionally months ago. "I guess we talk logistics next," she said. "Guess so." She stood up, looked around the guest room, then back at me. "Do you hate me?" I paused. "No. I just don't trust you." "I don't know if that's worse." I shrugged. "I do. We didn't hug. We didn't shake hands. We didn't do any of the ceremonial stuff you see in movies. She walked out of the room. I sat back down and picked up the drill manual again. I still wasn't planning on using it, but it felt better than looking at the door. The divorce took less time than picking a paint color for the living room did back in 2017. There were no long court battles, no property wars, no awkward mediations. We had no kids, no joint business, and thanks to my recent organizational phase, most of our shared belongings were already unofficially split by vibe. Jessica took the espresso machine, the dining chairs she never liked, and the guest towels still in their packaging. I kept the recliner, the tools, and the record player that only worked when it felt like it. We didn't argue. Not because we'd reached some enlightened understanding, but because there was nothing left to argue about. When a table collapses, you don't debate which leg went first. You sweep it up and figure out what you want to eat on the floor. Jessica moved out on a Wednesday. She took the afternoon off work, packed with surgical precision, and didn't say much. I didn't hover. I stayed in the garage, organizing screws into separate jars marked by head type and thread pitch. Her car was gone by 3. She left her key in a small bowl near the front door, along with a sticky note that just said, "Thank you." For what? I still have no idea. Maybe for not making it worse. Maybe for knowing exactly how much to say without turning it into a lecture. The silence that followed was different than the one we'd lived in before. That one was full of things unsaid. This one was clean. Blank. Which, surprisingly, wasn't depressing, it was kind of relaxing. I didn't have to wonder where she was. I didn't have to match her mood or interpret her tone. I could just exist in the space without reading between lines. Trent helped me take down the whiteboard. We didn't talk much while doing it. He just nodded once when he saw me pull it off the wall, and together we slid it back into the truck. I donated it to the local community center where it's now being used by a chess club, which feels both fitting and vaguely poetic in a non-sappy way. The guest room became my actual bedroom for a while. Not because I was emotionally stuck, but because the mattress was better and it was closer to the bathroom. I didn't make any sudden moves or fresh start declarations. I didn't sign up for a dating app or go on a road trip or pick up a new language. I went to work. I paid bills. I walked around the house and noticed how much quieter the refrigerator sounded when no one else was there to pretend it was more than a refrigerator. Every now and then, Jessica's name would show up in conversation. Friends would ask how I was doing. Some tiptoed, like they were afraid I'd fall apart if they said her name too loudly, like it was a spell or a legal issue. I told them I was fine. They didn't believe me at first. I get it. Divorce stories usually come with drama and late-night texts and at least one mutual friend forced to take sides. But this one didn't. It was just over. 3 months later, I ran into Rachel at the hardware store. She was holding 2 cans of wood stain and looking like someone who was hoping not to be seen. I nodded politely. She smiled, tight and quick. "How's everything?" she asked. "Organized." She gave a small laugh. "Jessica said you handled it differently. I've always been into systems." "She's doing all right." "Glad to hear it." Rachel shifted her weight, looked like she wanted to say more, then thought better of it. We both knew that whatever explanation she might offer wasn't going to change anything. "Good luck with the stain," I said. "You too, Kenneth." And that was it. In the months that followed, the house stopped feeling like a battleground of unspoken tension. It became something else, neutral. The couch was just a couch again. The thermostat stayed where I left it. I even reprogrammed it for optimal energy efficiency, a decision that brought me more satisfaction than I care to admit. One Saturday, I cleaned out the last of the shared storage bins. I found a box labeled vacation stuff, which was mostly receipts, chargers, and ticket stubs from trips we never really talked about afterward. I didn't keep any of it. Not out of spite, just practicality. I'd already lived through those moments. I didn't need a drawer full of evidence. I bought a new bookshelf. Real wood. Built it myself over 2 days and didn't swear once. That felt like progress. Sometimes people ask if I regret not confronting Jessica sooner. If I wish I'd just said it straight instead of playing the long, drawn-out game. But the thing is, I didn't need her to tell me the truth. I needed me to stop pretending I didn't already know it. And when it finally ended, it didn't leave me hollow or bitter or on a journey of self-discovery. It just left me with the kind of clarity you get after deleting files you don't need anymore. Not because they were bad, just because they weren't useful. I haven't spoken to Jessica since the papers were signed. No messages. No, "How have you been?" And honestly, I don't expect to. We were 2 people who tried to make something work until it didn't. She made choices. I responded in kind. It wasn't a movie. It wasn't a tragedy. It was just a life, ours for a while. And then it wasn't. These days, I still fold my socks with intention. I still label the jars in the garage. The quiet in the house is the good kind now. It's the kind where you're not waiting for something to go wrong. You're just living. And that's enough. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel